I believe some people think that craft is for those professionals over there, right? It's not for me. That's like saying that you don't need writing or craft in your work. We all write something, right? Emails, whatever, posts. To say that you don't need writing is like saying you don't need sharp knives in your kitchen because you're not a professional chef. It doesn't matter that you're not a professional chef. You need to cut shit. And the same with writing. It is a tool. People go, I don't know what to write. I was like, neither do I. Here's my theory around craft. The excitement of writing on its own, loosely and freely, is fun. The craft is where it gets really fun. And the reason why should I care about craft if I'm not trying to be a journalist or a poet? Because the fear of sharing your story or your expertise to the world, which you talk to people about, right? Sharing what they know, what they care about. When people could make fun of you, they could judge you. If you have really solid craft, it actually keeps your work afloat. If you tell a story about a horrible thing that happened to you and there's no craft, people go, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I don't get it. I don't know what happened. And then you'll be like, well, it was really traumatic. You don't understand. But when you can master craft and become really powerful at telling and sharing the story, that craft in some ways keeps you safe, keeps the story safe, because you cannot argue with it because it's that solid. And so I have taken so much comfort in the ever sharpening of craft, forever trying to get better at it, because it makes me feel so clear and so strong. And if you practiced it and got better at it, you would feel the same way.
What does it take to put your life's work out there in a really big way? How much can I do with this one precious life? Welcome to The Selfish Gift. If you sometimes worry that you're on the wrong path in life or no path at all, and you're searching for that one true passion to pull it all together and drive it forward, my guest today is going to bring you so much relief. Terri Trespicio is a writer, a public speaker, a brand consultant, and an occasional poet. She is the author of Unfollow Your Passion: How to Create a Life That Matters to You. Her TEDx talk, Stop Searching for Your Passion, has been viewed more than 8 million times. She's also the creator of the New Rules Studio, an online writing program based on the gateless writing method, which we're going to talk a lot about, and Terri is a certified instructor in it. And she has a whole bunch of programs and courses related to getting your message out of your head and into the world in an impactful way. So she's the perfect guest for The Selfish Gift. Terri, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation. I always love having folks on the show that have both, experience as a writer of things themselves and who also work with other writers and authors, because we just get that wonderful, deep, rich insight into what it means and what goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into this conversation, I would love to ask you to please debunk the big misunderstanding about your message. So your book is called Unfollow Your Passion, but you're not anti-passion. So what does unfollow your passion really mean?
Well, yes, it is a made-up term. I really loved it because I've never heard anyone say it. And also I was like, cool, that works well for Google, doesn't it? You know what I mean? But truly, the biggest misunderstanding about what I say is people think, oh, Terri's not into passion. Of course, that's not true. What this is really about is being anti the idea that you're supposed to know what you're going to do, what your purpose on the planet is, what things mean. We don't know. And it bothers me, and always has, that people say, well, you've just figured out what your passion is and you just follow that. Like, okay, real facile advice. Thanks. Like, that really is unhelpful advice, I found. Because I have always been passionate about, we're all passionate about different things, you know. That didn't help me when launching any kind of career, because I love to write. I love to write so much. I was afraid if I tried, I'd be bad at it. I was afraid if I did it outside of the walls of school, I would fail. Or I would find out I wasn't a real writer. And then what? So better not to try. And so the love of it kept it a little bit precious and made me afraid to try anything at all. And that's the worst.
I felt paralyzed in my life as a young person, especially thinking that, well, if I don't love it enough to give everything else up for it and do it 24/7, then I can never really be great at that thing. And so I guess I'm just doomed to be a dilettante forever and
Yes,
never.
exactly. I'm doomed to mediocrity
Right, right. I
forever.
would look at sort of like artists in their lofts, kind of painting 24 hours a day. I was like, I love painting. I don't love it that much. I love writing. I
Right.
don't love it that much. I didn't love
Right.
anything that
Right.
much.
No one
And
loves anything until they do it.
right, right. I mean, there are rare people who are just kind of like single focused, bit by the bug, and they just, but that's the exception. And that's certainly not the only way to create a life worth
No.
living. It's not at all. So anyway, we're going to get into
Wait,
it.
are you seriously kids who play the violin at a young age and go on to be like, a professional musician, that's their life? Are you going to tell me that at 5, 6 years old, they were like,
Right.
oh yeah, I'm going to have a career in this. They did it. And the more they practiced it, the more they experienced mastery, the
Right.
more they enjoyed it. We don't give ourselves a chance to get to know something enough because we're afraid we don't love it enough. Exactly what you said.
Right, right. And as we're going to get into in our conversation, it's not just one thing, right? We have seasons
No.
and chapters in our life, and we're going to rotate. Have gone through so many kind of like what seemed at the time to be dead ends or, dropped balls that I just walked away from that later come back to kind of blossom into something, and oh, look, 20 years later, that old thing that I walked away from has come back and now it makes sense.
That's
Okay,
right.
so
That's right.
we're going to talk about your story. We're going to talk about, so many things, your book. But first, you and I share a lot in commentary. And one of the things is that I also used to be a features editor. I
Really?
worked in magazines for a while. I was a features editor at a newspaper. The front page is up there on my wall. But I had a really super unconventional, winding, almost kind of like random, accidental career path. And so, where I have just a really unplanned journey to where I am today. So I really, really resonate with your message, and you right now are at you're at a place where a lot of the authors that I speak to would just love to get to. You've got
I am? I don't think I'm anywhere.
Okay, 8 million views on your TED Talk. That's
Yeah,
that's
but I have
bragging.
nothing to do with that, really.
Okay, so that's what we're going to get into. But the point is, you've got a popular book, you've got a widely viewed TED Talk, and and all of these things. You got a great website with all these
Well,
programs,
sounds good, doesn't it? And I think that's
right.
probably what we'll get to. It sounds amazing.
Well, and I think what I really want to know is, that wasn't like you didn't roll out of bed at the age of 21 and go like, that is my plan, and then just like
21.
create it. Right.
I would not, Maggie, I wouldn't even accept a job. I applied for some half-heartedly, and when they extended the offer for a full-time job to go be a media buyer or an editorial assistant, I turned them all down because I was afraid that they would discover that I couldn't do anything. I had just graduated school. Of course I couldn't do anything. I
Right.
wouldn't take anything. So I had no plan, no idea. In fact, all the things you just mentioned that seem like, wow, like they make a resume look great. They make a bio look
Well,
splashy.
it just looks like that is like that's a well-charted path. Somebody
Yeah,
made some
none of
smart
that
decisions.
stuff, the stuff you just mentioned,
Yeah.
none of it happened till well after 40.
Amazing. That's amazing to hear. Okay, so give us the brief sort of tops of the waves of like, what was that winding journey for you? You just
Yeah, and
mentioned
I think
college. You're at 21,
yes.
you're turning jobs down, and then at 40, you're on a viral TED Talk. What happened in between?
Oh my God. Just, I think when you say random and people falling into things, I think that's most of us. If
Yeah.
someone tells you they had it perfectly charted and it happened that way, they're either rare or they're lying.
Yeah.
And they're trying to make it look good because they think it looks good to know. I'm so much more interested in people who didn't know and took opportunities where they found them. But I was just very afraid. I was just incredibly scared. I had a very hard time after college. I should have had, and I should have been forced to take some job right out of school. My mother should have made me. She should have been like, you better get a job. But, they kind of were like, well, are you going to get a job? Like, I don't know what I was doing. So I was afraid. So I temped and I worked in offices and I worked for a book publicist for a few months. Like I just kind of tiptoed around the edges and was basically afraid to do anything. finally, when I reached just very depressed state where I had no new friends, I had nothing going on. And my mom's like, you really better just take any job. Like, you've got to do it. You've got to do it. And so I took an office job as nothing to do with anything that I had studied, just as an executive assistant.
And that was a management consulting firm, right?
Yeah, a management consulting firm. Ask me if I knew what management consulting was. I did not. All I knew was they were 3 people I would be supporting, one who didn't need my help at all. And they were very brilliant, kind of MIT think tank type. And so they were very studious and introverted and sweet. And that's where I learned how to work in office, work office machinery, work a fax machine, a copier, and a coffee maker. Like, that's where I learned the basics. And I was like, okay, this is, it was secure. I got paid. People were expecting me in the morning. I made friends. I developed a crush on someone. Like, then life started. So I often say, like, you don't need a dream job. You just need any job. And after that, after like a few years of that, like not even 2, I was like, well, right. What else am I going to do? So then I went back to school.
And you did a MFA in creative writing, right?
I did. And I want to add,
which is, let me just say, as far as kind of like practical degrees go,
no,
it isn't one.
No. And in fact, I feel, especially today, that I need to lean into that and say, check your privilege. Not everyone can go leave an office job, decide to leave and go study and be an MFA in poetry. That I lucked out on. I think my parents, first of all, my dad had worked for many years as an anesthesiologist. He was able to support this decision and he chose to. He didn't have to, but he did. And I was desperate to do something that was intellectually engaging again. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to this school. I want to study at this. I wanted to go to Emerson. I wanted to study creative writing and learn to teach and become an adjunct teacher, which I did. I got to do that. So that was lucky. And I devoured it. Like, I just loved being there. And I was still afraid, but doesn't matter. You go, you get an internship from there, you go to, and it went on from there. But until I got out of my house.
And then you wound up working at a magazine that was acquired by Martha Stewart, Omni Media. So then suddenly you're an editor.
Years later.
Okay.
There's a whole chunk in there where I got a job when the internet, there were jobs posted on the internet, but you'd have to go down to Kinko's to fax your resume. That's where the Gen X, the Gen X middling, where like you read it online, but you have to go somewhere to send your stuff. Absolutely. And I got a job as a copywriter at a wig company. And I thought, this has got to be a joke and it can't possibly be real. But it was a very real job and it paid very real money. And that's where I learned to be a creative in a creative professionals world, like with art directors and creative directors and merchandising and marketing. Like, that was where I learned that. So, and then I went to the magazine and took a huge pay cut because the idea of working in a magazine was, again, a privilege to be able to leave a job, to get paid less, to go work at a magazine because you really want to work there. And that was the magazine which 6 months later got acquired by Martha Stewart because it would have shut down. Like, we could barely pay our writers. Like, it was just small. It was going away. So we were saved. And that, Martha changed my life. Because she was able to salvage this magazine, ultimately moved it to New York a few years later. And I got to go. And I was the only employee that was not let go. And they said, you can come. Everyone else is fired. And I was like, because not everyone wanted to uproot from Massachusetts to move to New York City. By the way, I was not a kid. I was 36 years old when I moved to Manhattan, having never lived there. So again, I was like, is this real? Yes. So then I worked there. And then 2 years later, I got laid off from there. So again, nothing's really planned.
So how did you wind up doing a TED Talk about unfollowing your passion?
Oh, okay. Yes. Let's jump ahead. I got laid off. I don't know what to do. I said, I have some skills now. What if I just did what I did and wrote at home and had people send me money here? Like, I was like, can I do that? But the idea of freelance writing and pitching stories terrified me. I said,
and especially, in this day and age, because the payable fee per word it was never great. And now it's fallen off a cliff, right? Words are cheap.
This was like over a decade ago. So it was still,
they were still paying.
Yeah. But still, I was afraid. And I also was like, I don't want to do that all the time. So I started, and here's what happened. I positioned myself as a consultant because I realized I could write quickly. I could work with companies and individuals quickly in order to distill messaging for them. So here's what happened. Now I've done media. I've done able to do national media because I was an editor. I was doing some more speaking, getting paid little, if anything at all. But I would post that I was doing these things. And someone said, "Hey, you look like you're a speaker. The organization I work for, they're sponsoring a TED event, and they are down a speaker, and the event's in 6 weeks. Do you want to throw your hat in the ring?" And I was like, "Yes." So when people go, "Oh, were you always into this topic?" No, I got on a call with this guy, and he's like, "Do you have a topic?" And I was like, this is very rare. Usually you pitch an idea to TEDx, and then you'll see if you get accepted. This was like, "Hey, we've got a slot to fill. Who's the best or the least worst person we could put in there?" And he said, "Do you have any ideas?" And I, who had always fantasized about doing a TED Talk, but thought I was never going to be important enough to do one, said, "I have a few topics that have always bothered me," because I thought about it. Like, what are my opinions? Very important to think about. That's what makes an expert, not just expertise, an opinion about that expertise. So I said, I really I hate that people say things are fated. I hate that idea. And I also hate this idea of searching for your passion. He goes, "That's interesting. Why?" I was like, "I don't know. It just bothers me." And we talked about it. And he goes, "Why don't you go write up some things and let's meet tomorrow?" And I was like, "Okay." So I went away and I started writing the talk. Like I was like, "Okay, this is for real. I have this guy's attention. I'm in the running." And so I wrote up some thoughts and I got on the next day. And he goes, "Interesting. Why don't you add a little bit more and outline a bit more and let's talk tomorrow?" I got on a call with him every day that week, getting this coaching from someone who was trying to figure out if I had an idea. And I was trying to figure out if I had an idea. And I was like, "Mike, the event's in 6 weeks. Like, do I need to buy a plane ticket? Like, what's happening?" And he's like, yeah, you're in." And you know why? Because I had a perfect idea and I had a perfect resume? No, because he was like, "There might be something here." And he helped me shape it. So that is kind of unique. But here's how I got landed on that was that, what bothers you? And I still use that as a prompt because I hate bad advice. So I was like, well, what does it mean? So whatever, you can watch the TED Talk and you'll see I wrote that thing line by line, trying to figure out what I thought. And I didn't know what I thought till about 2 weeks before the event when I wrote.
That's bananas, Terri. One thing I love about when you tell the story in your book, it's really clear also that it wasn't, I mean, that's short notice, right? Most people, as you say, will kind of prepare for it in advance, but it's not like you dropped into it unprepared, but the preparation that you had done was
That's right.
Almost, no, I don't want to say accidental preparation, but it wasn't preparation with that end goal clearly mapped out in mind. So you had when you stepped on that red spot on the TED stage, you had already been doing a whole bunch of public speaking in really low stakes situations, and including the very first speech you gave, or I don't know if it was the first batch of speeches that you gave, were not even your own words. They were memorized. And so this idea that we have to kind of like be fully formed, savants and geniuses out of the box is just false, right? So you can start with some little kind of what looks like a waste of time or not a path to greatness.
No. If it gets you in front, if you like to speak, if it gets you in front of people and it's a practice doing it. I mean, I already knew I wanted to do it. Some people go kicking and screaming and they ultimately do have to do it and they get better and they learn to love it. But I always kind of knew I loved it. I was just like, where can I, go and do this? I was like pitching organizations and doing that kind of, sometimes people didn't even show up. But that one gig I got, they were looking for presenters and they're like, "Here's the script. You memorize it. It's 20 minutes long. You memorize it and you do it pretty much exactly this." And so I was like, wait, how do you memorize 20 minutes? Like, I'm not an actor. I didn't done that, you know, 20 minutes. And then they're like, "All right, you made it to the next round. You're going to Minneapolis." I got flown to Minneapolis to compete and do the same talk. Do you know how many times I heard this talk? It was terrible, but they were looking for people who were great presenters of information.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to do media, everything else, not because I was smarter than anyone else.
And all
but
of
if
this
you can present a message.
It's about skills. And I think that in today, there is so much emphasis on mindset, mindset first, mindset above all. Mindset is everything. Now, I'm a fan of mindsets. It's really super
Totally.
important to have like a good,
Yeah.
positive growth mindset, et cetera, et cetera. But mindset is not everything. And I think that well, let me ask you, do you think that social media and the kind of like, I don't know, culture of self-made influencers that we have has made us feel somehow that it's training us to kind of expect or
Yeah.
strive for a big break and a magical quick fix?
Yes. Well, when you talk about big breaks and overnight successes, it's often like, an overnight success takes about 10 years because
Right.
it's the moment that maybe you stumbled into the public stage, right? Which is rare, could be a viral anything that happens. We can't predict that either.
But
But
meanwhile, you've been on the back of
mindset,
a turnip truck practicing your speech for the
totally.
cows,
Yes. That's exactly it. And
getting
I'm
super good
telling
at
you,
it. Yeah.
I think, and I agree with you, mindset is critical insofar as addressing mindset will allow you to even practice this skill.
Right.
But then mindset alone is not, magic. If a lot of times mindset can get in the way of even trying and getting better at a skill. But the
Yeah.
mindset for me, I've only done really paid attention to it so that I could learn to trust my own work. But practice skill, you're right. It gets underrated because people think it can just happen fast.
Well, and I think that what happens is if we're used to this idea that like if we're overly attached to the idea that sort of positive mindset and thinking of yourself as like you're just like hewing to your potential is the key to your good fortune, then you try something new, you suck at it. And then you're like, I suck at this. No, don't tell yourself that you suck at it. You're the best at it. No, I'm really not the best at it. Oh God, it's all too yucky. I'm going to walk away. Right. So to be able to go like, right, I'm a beginner and I do not yet have terribly good skills, and that's okay. And I'm going to keep on going. There's not a lot in our world today that's encouraging us to sort of put our shoulders to the grindstone and, sort of keep on practicing.
Yeah. And
you're not just going to sit on your ass waiting for mindset to deliver an amazing life of excellence to you.
No, not at all. And also, like, again, I don't know what you call late, what you don't call late, but everything I did that I have enjoyed doing, I was a dancer for many years, but I did not start as a 5-year-old ballerina. I hated that stuff. My mom tried to put me in that stuff and I hated it. I came to dance when I was ready at 14. And then danced in college. And I was always a little insecure that there's these girls who I dance with who are just bodies made by ballerina. Like,
you're already washed up at 14. Look at you.
They were already washed up. Whereas I had so much energy and excitement discovering what my body could do if I trained it, that I was the one who danced the longest, right? I went on to dance in little quasi-professional amateur kind of dance companies well after college into my 20s because I wasn't tired of it. Everything I got into later than you think.
Interesting.
And I think that's really important because
it's really important, especially for the Gen Zs out there who might be panicking if they don't have their own sort of skincare line, and by the time they're 25, like whatever. I have a daughter who's in that cohort, and I know that there's a lot of pressure that the young people today are feeling that they're under to kind of like have their whole thing figured out, and it's both scary to think like you have no idea what's going to happen and you cannot really plan for it. You can prepare, but some of your preparation is going to be accidental. Just wing it and just move, feel your way along it. That's, on the one hand, that's really scary because it feels like loss of control. But on the other hand, it can be the antidote to anxiety because you're like, oh, I cannot have this all figured out. Therefore, I really don't have to. Therefore, I'm exactly in the right place. And I can't really go wrong. I'm just going to keep going forward.
Well, I think that it's the same pressure that was on us 30, 40 years ago to figure out your life. I don't think it's any different now. It's just that there's pressure to kind of monetize your ideas immediately.
And to be famous about it. You're going to
we were not. None of my pre-30s life was caught on any kind of camera except for like at every holiday. That was it. And and you didn't know what you're doing until you figured it out as you went. So yes, I think that what's happening with the social media thing is like it's become a pressure cooker of stuff. But
Yeah.
again, and I don't know what it's like to be a kid growing up with that, but I just personally don't engage with it too much because I will check in, see what everyone's up to, but I don't think it helps me at all. I'm much healthier feeling when I'm making rather than when I'm purely consuming other people's stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the kind of like key principles that that you encourage people to try on in this book?
Well, I have since changed my opinion a little bit about one of the things.
Ooh, tell me.
Yeah. And so I felt like a little weird about this. I was like, my friend Alex, who I write about in the book, where she was a famous vegan and then stopped being vegan and she got like hate mail forever. I feel a little bit about that in a small scale around my opinion about the comfort zone. Because
Tell me.
yes, because my editor was like, oh, that comfort zone thing is such a fresh take. People don't talk about that. They always talk about leaving your comfort zone and you have to get out of it and be uncomfortable. And remember, context. I wrote this during the pandemic. We were sealed into our homes and our comfort zone was, can I just make it through this? So it was written in a time when we were all kind of confined. But I have always said, I hate this sort of privileged idea of like, let's try to get uncomfortable. And I'd be like, listen, I'm always uncomfortable. I'm always a little bit uncomfortable. And the idea that we should try to be uncomfortable is like, oh, I'm sorry. Is your life too easy? And so I have said, my goal is not to become uncomfortable. My goal is to make room so that I can be comfortable doing more things. I still stand by that.
Right.
But,
yeah. And so in the book, just for context, if for those
context.
that haven't read it, you've got a whole chapter which is about stay in your comfort zone. It's not about making yourself uncomfortable. It's about expanding your comfort zone so that more things are comfortable for you.
Yes.
Okay. So how has your thinking evolved? I'm so curious.
Well, and the context, again, and you're right, I should have said this, is as if we spend all of our time comfortable and we should make an effort to go out and stand in traffic once in a while. When in fact, most of us are usually outside of our comfort zones, feeling around for our keys. We can't get back in. So I still stand by, and especially with women, I do not want a man telling a woman she should be uncomfortable, because that is the story of all of women's discomfort and suffering for all the ages. My feeling has changed a little bit based on what a very smart white man taught me, Adam Grant, not me, but in his book. I was reading his book, Hidden Potential, and he says, in fact, we are more likely to learn when we're a little uncomfortable, not terrified, not, anxiety, cortisol coursing through your system, but are you willing to entertain a little bit of discomfort, not aim for it, but endure it a bit? And I would have said, no, and don't tell me to be uncomfortable. But now I'm like, you know what? What if I risk that? That is okay. That I was like, all right, I'm getting on board with, I'm willing to be uncomfortable a little bit. And I wasn't before.
Okay.
So
well,
I'm changing my approach.
I appreciate the, witnessing your own sort of evolution of thought in real time, because I think that it is important to kind of keep on updating,
challenging
our perspective. But I also wonder whether it might depend a little bit on like how you're wired and what kind of past you've had. I mean,
trauma?
I'm a person who has, I have chronic anxiety for absolutely decades of my life, panic attacks, insomnia, all kinds of stuff. I have way too much discomfort already. So for me, the notion that it is okay and even generative for me to I need to practice consciously to create more comfort in my life and remind myself that it's safe to do that. Great. I'm correcting for that outside in problem. And, but I understand what you're saying about, if you're never challenging yourself, you can't really grow. I was fucking challenging myself just to wake up in the morning and put my feet on the floor without stabbing myself in the eye. You know what I mean? Like, that's I
guess I just don't like the advice of like, get comfortable, getting uncomfortable. It's like, no, I'm going to pass through this and I'm going to endure it for a minute.
Yeah.
But I'm like you. I am not interested in triggering myself and making myself sick over something. But I did change up.
Or feeling like somehow it's not safe to be comfortable. Like, oh no, I'm too comfortable. I'm not growing. Like, I mean, what a way to spoil the one safe space that you have in your head.
I agree with you, but I did. Oh God, I'll say it. I did end a relationship recently, which has been
Okay.
incredibly hard. You want to talk uncomfortable? The comfort is to just stay where you're really cozy, but then you have to acknowledge that there's another discomfort. And the only reason I mention that now is because I have felt emotionally uncomfortable and was alarmed a little bit, and then was like, nope, this is exactly, you don't fix it so that you don't experience it. And so
Right.
that's,
Right.
well, I
Right.
think that's
Right.
hard. But again, sometimes to do the brave thing, it doesn't feel easy.
No, it's not easy. That's a misnomer, right? About comfort and discomfort. Growth is always going to be challenging. It doesn't have to feel. It shouldn't be terrifying, and to the point
No,
where you're
no, no.
shut right down. But I think the point that you made a little minute ago about women and about people socialized female, people growing up as with female identity. It I'm wondering whether, we hear a lot about how women don't ask for raises or apply for jobs until we feel 100% ready or
Right.
overqualified for that. And I wonder if some of that shows up even just in the way we approach planning for our lives. Like, I'm not ready to set a goal for myself because I don't feel 100% ready to not just achieve it, but to be the best at it,
Mhm.
and it's like, okay, now I'm paralyzed. And that's not helpful.
No, absolutely not. And so this idea of, I just tell myself that, like, if I don't feel prepared, probably no one else does either.
Yeah.
And this idea of feeling confident at the outset is a misnomer. No one
Yeah.
feels confident before they do something they haven't done. It's illogical. And it's okay not to know and not to feel that way. No,
And
absolutely
I
not.
actually think that that is a sort of a way of, if you look at your comfort zone
Procrastinating.
as sort of like the bullseye and then discomfort is a ring around it, that is a way of bringing some of that scary zone into a place of ease and comfort, because, or at least it's befriending it, to sort of
Mhm.
think like, okay, I'm really out of my depth. True fact. I don't know what I'm doing. Also, just
True fact.
true unemotional statement of
Yes.
fact. I do not know what I'm doing. And I feel some trepidation and anxiety about my performance. Also true. But then there's the meta layer, which was like, and that's a terrible sign that you're on the wrong track or you're a bad
No,
person.
no,
And
no.
that is the part that you can call bullshit on.
Mhm. No,
And
I
I
agree. I
And
think,
that's a way to kind of go, yeah, I'm out here with my pants down and I'm just winging it. And that's
yeah,
okay.
yeah, agreed. I think, as anyone will say, the older you get, the more you realize you don't know. And the idea that you ever thought you were supposed to know
I
was,
mean, it's just,
is the trick. Like,
and
no.
getting back to something I said at the very beginning, and I'm curious to know whether this is true for you. I suspect it is, but this idea that like all of these sort of things I tried and then didn't wind up doing. Now that I'm at the stage I am in life, um, I'm 52, and now I'm like kind of I marvel at how many of what I thought were dead ends have come back and proven to be
Yes.
really crucial strands that are giving me
Mhm.
uniqueness, distinction. I'm reclaiming that old stuff that I walked away from, and it's sprouting. It just needed 20 years to germinate.
That's
And
right.
and that is like such an important thing for young people to know when they're like, "Oh my God, look at all those things I failed at and walked away from." It's like,
They're
fine,
in
those are
you.
yeah, those
They're
seeds are
in
just
you. It's just part of what it requires. I think well, I know we are living in a time where it's like, just follow it. How to get it done. It'll happen fast. And it's like, the stuff that you do that will matter is inefficient, inconvenient, and will likely put you at risk for pain and loss. If it doesn't have those things, it isn't really worth much, because I could do to-do lists all day, check them off all day, and have nothing to show for them. But if I really wait and say, my life is long and I'm going to learn stuff later about my past that I'm not even ready to think about yet, like, why would we disparage it? Why? Because we think like we're still industrial age hangover. We think like a machine, linear, and whatever's behind us is over and it's trash. We just keep moving forward, when that's actually not it at all. There's nothing linear. As go down the rabbit hole in TikTok. There's nothing linear about time. There's nothing linear about our lives. There's other universes and parallel universes. But I think that that's really, we're so quick to dismiss
yeah.
what we could do.
Yeah, let's fall in love with the slow burn that we don't really
Slow
understand.
burn.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's a level of kind of like, trust, which is also sort of surrender, which is like, oh, you know what? I don't got to get this. I don't
Yeah.
need to understand where this thing goes. I just
No.
know that today this feels like the right move for me. And like those skills that, that I didn't really intend to develop, I will use them one day in a way that is really true to my own creative output. So, and I mean
That's right.
so let's pivot now and talk about how that came into play for you in your writing life. So you did an MFA, you worked as a copywriter,
Yeah, I did
and
an
also
MFA and then didn't do anything with that. That thesis sat on a shelf. You know what I mean? Like
amazing.
I was just like, okay. I, I wasn't like I immediately applied it. However, now looking back, which Steve Jobs says the only way those dots connect, I
Yeah.
realize that in my work as a brand consultant, which I've done for years when I was first on my own, right? And I still do it, but I mean, it's not the main thing. Uh, Brand consulting, helping people put into words what resonates with what they stand for, right? That kind of thing. That is poetry. And when people say,
Mm,
oh, how do you say that? That sounds so great. So do I. The reason I was like, why am I good at this? Why does it feel so natural? Oh, I know. Because I did it for years, because I studied poetry. I worked on like line breaks, this word, that word. I was like a surgeon of the word. That's where my attention was for a million years, right? It feels like pre everything else. And so that attentiveness to words and lines and tension and rhythm and sound, that comes into play later as a
mm,
copywriter and brand person. Now, you wouldn't go, oh, I need a brand consultant, but she better have got an MFA in poetry. Of course not. Well, I use it to my advantage because when I'm being considered for work, I say, I did not come up through corporate marketing. That is not who I am. You
yeah.
are getting a poet who figured out a way to make a living as a poet. And so that's how, because other people don't want to and couldn't if they tried necessarily, don't want to try creating poetry of their work. And I find that to be some of the most rewarding things that I
Mhm.
get to do. But who would have connected that?
Right,
Right?
right.
No one. So that's
So
anyway, that's where that
as
writing
you're telling
comes
that
in.
story, I'm thinking about how that it has resonance in my own life too, because my earlier part of my career was I was always working with words, but not on my own stuff. I
Right.
was, I was also a copywriter way back in the day. I was then a copy editor, and then, different kind of editor. I was a magazine editor and a newspaper editor, and then a department head. So I was more about the planning of the content rather than the working on the content. Um, and none of that was my passion. I liked
Good
it well
job.
enough. I liked it well enough to do it, and I was, I had enough kind of like innate skill, just sort of like I was just kind of wired that way. I tended to be
Hmm.
good at it enough so that I wanted to get better at it. And only now in my, in my late 40s and into my early 50s, have I started to realize that, oh, I can apply those skills that I accidentally developed working on somebody else's company.
That's right.
Now
Craft
I
it.
can apply that to something I that is really, really deep and close to my heart. But Terri, what about, so now I can just almost hear people out there listening and thinking, okay, it's all very well for you. I want to be an author. You are an
Hmm.
author, but you started out with an MFA and like were a
It
wordsmith
didn't.
all those years. But
No.
what we know is that those whatever that latent kind of skill or talent is, inside of I mean, it's going to be different from one person to the next, and that is the point. It will come out and become useful to you. But I wanted to ask you to riff for a little while, or go into depth for a minute about how writing in particular is one of those skills that people think they either have it or don't have
Yeah.
it. So you and I
Yes.
just both talked about,
Yeah.
our decades of kind of practicing that craft before we got around to making our own art. But how do people misunderstand their own relationship with writing? Because it seems to be so central to what a lot of us want to do, particularly listening to this podcast.
Well, listen, no one, I'm sorry to say this, no one needs an MFA to write shit. You do not need a degree. You do not need to have worked in a magazine or been a copywriter. Writing is your birthright. and no one will convince me otherwise. I don't know why people walk around bragging about how bad a writer they are when they wouldn't walk around saying, oh, reading, I can't read. I can barely read anything. You wouldn't say that. And yet reading and writing are flip sides of the same coin. If you can read, you can write.
Wow.
And if you read, you grow. We all know the benefits of reading, right? Reading will expand your horizons. A book for $20 could change your life. Yes. But reading, you are not just a one-way road where other people's information go channeled right to your brain and then you're a better person. If you do not make use of writing as a tool, you have cut yourself off from one of the most powerful self-discovery tools there is. And there people who use writing, I don't mean publish a book. That's a different thing. You want to get in that slog, you can. It's a whole other thing. But if you do not write, you will not attain the kind of clarity, centeredness, reflection, or growth that someone who uses writing does. And I promise you that not only, and this has nothing to do with the MFA. In the MFA, I got to read cool books, listen to smart people, and have my work torn to freaking shreds by other students who were jealous and small-minded and just wanted to swing their dicks around. That's what a lot of MFA programs are. I'm sorry, but they are. What changed my life, again, after 40? For me, life did not start till after 40. After 40, I was 40 actually at the time, so a while ago. I went on a gateless style retreat at the urging of a friend. I had no idea what it was. I just said, oh, I haven't been connected to my writing in a long time. And in truth, I had always kept it on a bit of a leash. That's just what it was. And when I went on that retreat, we were encouraged to write, and then only what we got was feedback on our writing that was only positive, not smoke up your butt, but like an attention and just like dialogue around craft. And that weekend set me so aflame, it was almost, as I say, post-coital. When I left that retreat, I was like, I felt like I had fallen in love. It was the same emotions, it was the same hormones, it was the same reproductive urge.
Wow.
I felt like I'd fallen in love with not like just myself, but with the word again. And I did not miss a goddamn retreat in a decade. I've gone every year, if not once, if not twice. Because, and that's not the only thing. You don't go on retreat and your life changes it. You have to keep changing it.
Yeah.
You have to tend to that fire. But Maggie, as you know now that you've experienced it, nothing has opened me up like this. So the Gateless method was created by Suzanne Kingsbury, who is in many ways a book shaman. She's a publishing professional, has been for many years. She was a selling novelist herself. And the whole idea is simple but complex. It is an approach and framework to creative or generative work, meaning something you want to create more of, that focuses on craft and strengths and removes criticism, competition, and judgment from the equation. There are very strict rules we follow in our live workshops and even in the recorded workshops around that define our behavior and how we talk about the work, how we talk about ourselves, how we talk to other people. And it governs an entire worldview of writing that has nothing to do with whether you want to or ever will publish a book. That's a separate project. What you're talking about is the Academy, which is a months long program for people who want to learn the anatomy of the book. Okay, that's different. But I run programs where tons of people do gateless writing all the time, and they have no interest in doing a book, some of them. So the idea is you can use it as a tool for discovery. You use it as a way to get very clear and on your own mind, on your own work. And the thing that makes it so different is not just that we don't criticize, we don't. It's that it has changed my view of writing from a thing you do to please someone else that must go through a machine that someone else must approve for public consumption, to the accessing of, as Suzanne says, the doors to the self and the showing of utmost potential in our ability to use the word to express what we know, love, and care about. It has changed and influenced my individual consulting, my group and corporate consulting. I've taken Gateless Method into financial advisors, the top executive brass at L'Oreal. I've done workshops with people at Redken. Like, it doesn't matter. It's human. It's not about writers. But the writers are the most blocked, and they know because they're trying to write, whereas everyone else was like, oh, I didn't even know I could do that. Oh, it looks like I'm pretty good at it. So what's exciting is as you know, Maggie, to watch people like that gasping sort of like opening up of worlds and potential. And so all the programs I offer, you do not have to have a byline to do any of them, but we offer both real-time drop-in workshops, which you mentioned in the studio, 3 times a week right now, and it probably will grow, where you can come in and participate in what is a structured writing session with a meditation, a prompt, and sharing and feedback. And Maggie, it's changed everything. I believe it has made me a better person because I could be a judgy bitch like anyone.
It's incredible, and what you're talking about is I love that you're talking about writing as a tool for self-discovery and kind of embracing what is true about this joy and delight that you experience in Gateless when you see something come out of you onto the page that delights you and has wonderful qualities to it, is the same experience as looking in the mirror and liking what you see. And so I can see how it can and does impact so many aspects of life beyond just like writing craft or writing practice or a writing career.
But I have a theory about craft because I find I love talking about it. And you might go, well, that's because you go to your MFA and you're a nerd and you like this stuff. No, it's not, because I don't teach MFA programs, right? And I've come to this. I believe some people think that craft is for those professionals over there, right? It's not for me. That's like saying that you don't need writing or craft in your work. We all write something, right? Emails, whatever, posts. To say that you don't need writing is like saying you don't need sharp knives in your kitchen because you're not a professional chef. It doesn't matter that you're not a professional chef. You need to cut shit. And the same with writing. It is a tool. People go, I don't know what to write. It's like, neither do I. But I get up every morning now. I've created a new habit where I do it first thing in the morning. And I will write in the morning and I don't know what the hell I'm going to write about. And I let it go. And here's my theory around craft. The excitement of writing on its own, loosely and freely, is fun. The craft is where it gets really fun. And the reason why should I care about craft if I'm not trying to be a journalist or a poet? Because the fear of sharing your story or your expertise to the world, which you talk to people about, right? Sharing what they know, what they care about, when people could make fun of you, they could judge you. If you have really solid craft, it actually keeps your work afloat. If you tell a story about a horrible thing that happened to you and there's no craft, people go, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I don't get it. I don't know what happened. And then you'll be like, well, it was really traumatic. You don't understand. But when you can master craft and become really powerful at telling and sharing the story, that craft in some ways keeps you safe, keeps the story safe, because you cannot argue with it because it's that solid. And so I have taken so much comfort in the ever sharpening of craft, and forever trying to get better at it, because it makes me feel so clear and so strong. And if you practiced it and got better at it, you would feel the same way.
And just as you said, it's fun, it's very exciting, and worth noting, it's not easy. It's not
what is worth doing,
right?
that is.
That's the hard part. We've all had, well, those of us who've spent some time engaging with writing will have had brief flashing moments where the words kind of pour out and it's like, oh wow, look what blah, blah, blah. I just downloaded that from the universe and I love it. And then there are many, 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 many more hours spent kind of tinkering and agonizing and experimenting and trying stuff on, which is a slog, but it's a fun and it's a rewarding slog. But this is not to say that you just plug in and everything flows without any effort or intention. That's not the case at all. But it can be really enjoyable.
Generative things can flow. It's more like the revision.
The revision, the craft. You go like, does this work? Right. Where did my attention wander? What does not connect here? What I need something here to punch it. I need something to sort of build up to it. And
and that's the fun part. Unless you hate that, if someone says, well, this sounds hard, I don't want to do it. That's cool. You don't have to craft a novel, but the writing itself is enough of a release and has a healing effect that it's worth doing for that, whether you monetize it or sell it or not. I mean, you were publishing for a long time. You know that that part is sharing stuff with the world. That's very scary. That's why Gateless is key, because I learn what I like and I learn what's strong in my work so that I actually don't give as much of a shit what people say about it. And I really
Right.
don't. I did not go back and read all my reviews on Amazon. I know people who do that. They go, I'm not reading that shit. Like, it doesn't help me. The book's done. Whatever.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
And I love that you mentioned sharing, because I bookmarked a quote from in your book, which is that you said one of the most powerful transformative things you will do is make something. The second most powerful thing you can do, share it. And it's a whole different discipline. So, talk to me about what it has been like for you to put yourself out there in a really big way. What was hard about it? What did you put into that? Investments of time, money, courage, etc. Talk to me about
Yeah.
sharing yourself and your work.
Well, I told you about the first retreat I went on, and I started writing and I didn't know what it was. And I went on another retreat, and I wrote in between. And I said to Suzanne, well, I know I want to do a book, but I don't know what it is yet. And she said, well, how much do you have? And I was like, oh, these pieces. She's like, come back to me when you have like 80,000 words. Like, just keep writing. When you write, the work emerges. You have to keep doing it. So I did that. And then after a few years, I invested in a professional, in this case, Suzanne, but you might invest in another professional. And because I knew that I don't know how to do the book. Like, I don't know how to do that. I just need someone else's eyes on it too. And I wanted someone in this community. And so we laid it out. We tried to figure out what it was, and we tried that way, then we tried this way. Once I knew I was investing money, to me, when I've invested money in something, I'm just far more likely to do it. I was like, well, I've already gotten this far into the woods. I'm not going to pull back and go, well, I can't. And the truth is, like you, having published smaller things before for years, I knew that I'd be lucky if anyone read the book.
Yeah.
So I'm hardly going to be like, what's everyone going to think? Most of your friends won't even read it. Like, they just won't. But most podcast hosts who talk to me have read it, and my friends haven't, I think. I think not. But so I already knew. And then when you had asked about, like you were saying, should we talk about that in the process? Like, what happened? Right. So yeah, I wrote out a bunch of stuff. We tried to piece it together and figure out, oh, maybe it's this. I had a whole other idea for this book.
Oh,
it wasn't
wait, was this before or after the TED Talk? Because it kind of feels like the TED Talk
No, it was
came
after
and then
TED Talk was years ago. TED Talk was
okay.
2015. I'm talking about, this is 2018, 19.
So even with all of that attention on your TED Talk, it wasn't an automatic, I guess I'm going to write a book about my TED Talk now.
No, never.
That's so interesting.
Never,
I would
ever.
have assumed that was just like a
Nope.
no-brainer next step.
Oh, you do a TED Talk, then you write a book about your TED Talk. A lot of people do. Zero interest. I said, I already gave the talk. I'm not doing that again. That was years ago. I'm not doing that. Like you said, it's a skill that's in your body. It's ideas that are in your body, and you'll draw on them later. Yeah. Zero interest. I wanted to write something a little bit more like, I wasn't interested in doing how-to. I had done that for years. I was interested in more literature, like writing something that felt beautiful, that felt rich, that you read not just for the exercises, right? So I had a book of what I thought were essays. And it was called How to Swallow a Button, because it starts with a story about a little girl who bullied me into swallowing a button off her bedspread. And that was like a really galling experience. And I never forgot it. And I said, this is what happens. Women are told to swallow things they don't want to. And so the ideas were all there about women, about agency, about bucking the systems that tell us otherwise. That's in my blood. That's in my DNA. I had the book of essays.
You're pitching the book of essays. Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
So I have an agent. I did not have an agent. I had the proposal. I pitched it to a whole bunch of agents. And people always go, well, what do you do when you don't have contacts in publishing? Most people don't. I actually did have. I was in a networking group with literary agents and publicists and publishers. Okay. And people were like, oh, let us know when you get your book. One of them had taken me out to lunch. I'd met her through Suzanne. I was like, oh, this is going to be easier than I thought. When I sent out my proposal to people I knew, half of them didn't write back at all.
Wow.
So it's not personal. It's just another email they got.
Yeah.
So when you think, well, I need someone who's going to like me. No. So I wrote to people I didn't know. I looked at books. This is what they tell you. You look at books that you love. You look at the acknowledgments. Who are they thinking? And so you look up those agents and you reach out to those people and you say, hey, I really love this book. I would love to be represented by someone like you. When I tell you I had a list, of people. There's 6,000 literary agents. There's no one right one. There's just
Yeah.
the ones you meet and the ones who will give you the time of day. I went and met with another one who told me who I should follow on Twitter. I was like, that is not what I'm interested in. I was like, this is not the right fit for me. And every agent told me what I was trying to do would be too hard. It's going to be too hard because you'd have to be really famous or be really like a super published, literary person. And you don't have either of those things. What they were really saying is they couldn't sell it. But don't confuse what an agent can sell with what you can do. They just didn't see it. And that's good because they shouldn't be selling it.
Right.
I had one person who I'd met years before when I had given a presentation on doing a TED Talk, because that's what I knew. And at the end of that TED Talk, there was the networking group I was in, right? And people were like, oh, anyone could come in and do a presentation with them. And people were like, oh, this is great. Blah, blah, blah. By the way, do you have a book? And I was like, kinda. And I looked at Suzanne because she was there. And I was like, we're working on it. And Suzanne was like, yeah, she's still, we hadn't had it ready yet. That's a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So a few people came up to me and said, when you have it ready, let me know. Half those people never go back to me. As I said, one of them said, well, I'm going to be leaving. I'm an editor at Atria. I'm going to be leaving. I'm going to be an agent. So you let me know. She was someone on that list. And I said, no, I'll send it to her. So I wrote to her. This is 3 years later. And I said, Johanna, I don't know if you remember me. We met at this event. You were so kind to take an interest. And you said when I had a proposal ready, I should reach out. Well, I'm ready. And I sent it to her. And she was the first person I sent it to who wrote right back. And she said, what else do you have? Are there other pages that I haven't seen? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah. She said, send it. And then she gave me notes on how to fix the proposal. And then she said,
this is still, the proposal was still the pitching the literary essays.
Yep, nothing's changed.
Okay.
Nothing's changed.
Wow.
So I meet her. I said, why are you giving me this free advice? This doesn't feel right. You're helping me with this proposal.
I'm suspicious.
Why? You have time. Why are you helping me with it? I said, I'm like, we don't work together. We don't have a contract. I don't know. Is this right? And she was like, she's lovely. She's from Ecuador. So I'm going to do a horrible job of her accent. She said, she was like, you make the changes, then we sign. And I was like, okay. So she wanted to see if I could respond to revision.
Smart.
So rather than push back and go, I don't want to change stuff, I did whatever that bitch said.
Yeah.
I said, what do you think? And she said, do this, do this, do this. And then she said, here's the contract. Let's sign. I looked at it, had someone else look at it. I signed. And the next day she sent it out to boom, every I was like, holy shit, this is really happening. Oh my God. And it was spring of 2020.
Wow.
So a lot of places did not have the bandwidth to be looking at stuff. And she said to me, clear your calendar because we're going to have meetings. I was like, oh my God. And so I was like, okay, I cleared my whole calendar and we had one meeting booked. And she said, you can free up your calendar. We don't have that many meetings. So we didn't have too much interest. Some people were like, maybe, I don't know. We had one editor interested at Atria, where she used to work. Happened to be, she knew the people there, but she knows everybody. She's been doing this forever.
Yeah.
Her name is Johanna Castillo. She's amazing. And so we got on a call with the editors from Atria, from the editor and the publicist. They want to see if this person can behave and be someone we would want to be selling a book. They're in it for the product.
Yeah,
they're not trying to coax talent out of you. They go, can you sell? And I showed up and we talked and she was very sweet. And then she said, we probably can't sell it the way it is now, but we like the work, but we think we would have a better shot if we made it a personal development title. And I was like, oh, so you want to make it a how-to book? And she's like, yeah. And, we kind of got to bring that TED Talk in. It's the only thing you ever did. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh, that old thing? You want me to get that old dress out and trot that around? She's like, oh, yeah. Yeah, that's how we're going to sell it. We can't do it. And I was like, oh, I backed into it. So I was like, oh, so listen, I had a little dark night of the soul where I was like, what am I doing? It's going to be horrible and cheesy and blah, blah, blah. But I said, I don't even know if I need to do this. Maybe I won't do it. I had already signed the contract for this book sale. After signing it, because I was like, listen, and why did I do it? You're going to ask, right? Why did I bother? If this isn't the book I thought I wanted to do,
wasn't your passion.
No. Why did I do it?
Yeah, why?
It's fucking Simon and Schuster.
Yeah,
And no one
exactly.
else
Yeah.
was knocking. And I
Yeah.
wanted to do a traditional publisher route. I wanted to try that.
Right.
And if I didn't make it with the big wigs, I would have tried a smaller press. Like, it was an experience. My whole life wasn't hanging on. This is just a really exciting hobby. You better believe it wasn't like paying the bill. Like, I was trying to scramble, right? So I signed it. And then I said to Suzanne, I don't know if I could do this. And she goes, oh, honey, you signed the contract. You're definitely doing it. Like, you have to do this. And so I did it. And you know what? Once I surrendered to the process and said, make this the best version of this book for this audience, they want to sell it, help them sell it.
Right.
Do well with this, write ever a fucking book you want to write later.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to pass this first. And so I did. And it turned out everyone was happy. That's all I can say.
That
Everyone
is
was
an
happy.
amazing story, Terri. And I did not think it went that way for you. I really, really did think it was much more. Okay, maybe it was like a kind of a not a totally conventional path, but it became conventional after the TED Talk. And that's not true.
Not at all.
After that, you went out there shilling something that was super different, and then
7
had to
years
kind of
after.
like eat your own medicine and go like, oh, this isn't the passion project that I'm out here promoting. This
Nope.
is, a self-help book based on something that I was talking about 7 years ago or whatever.
That's right.
And
But
and
it's
you
a
had to
memoir
sort of
in
get over
disguise.
yourself and do the thing that's in front of you with the best of your ability, and it totally worked out.
Well, it's a memoir in disguise because
Yeah.
it's a personal story. I wanted really good stories. I just had to put a wrapper around it.
And your really good stories, I love the way you integrated your stories. And so I work with a lot of people who want to tell their stories and they're sort of skirting around the edge of a self-help book, and they're kind of not really wanting to step into the role of expert or give people advice. And what they really want to do is, I hear a lot of people say, I think that, people learn, they're guessing at what people want. They're saying, I think that people really learn best through storytelling. And so I think that if I just get up there and say what happened to me, that is my best way
No,
to
you need
impart
to
my
own.
wisdom. And
No.
it's just not true. Most people are
No.
out there looking to meet a practical need, and the stories are what make the medicine slide down.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I think that's a fear of assuming power, which women, we should be
Yes.
ashamed of ourselves. Do not be afraid. There's plenty of douchebag people out there giving advice, and we're not about giving advice. I don't think I'm better than anyone.
Yeah.
I just had my own life happen to me, and I learned some things, and I wanted to share it in a way that might spark something in someone else. It's not an above below situation. And you can't just blurt your story and hope someone figures it the fuck out, because they can't.
Yeah.
You need to know what the arc of that story is and why you're telling it. And that was a wonderful practice. I'm so glad I had the experience, because I had heard authors bitching about publishers for years. I was probably happier than most because I didn't expect them to change my life. I didn't expect them to make me famous. That's not their job. Their job is to make just enough books so they don't regret their decision. And we did that. And now it's on me. My life did not change that much because I wrote that book.
Yeah.
It did not blow me out of the water. Just like a lot of writers, they write many books until you do it. So were you looking for a speed ticket to success, or do you want to write? And
Right.
it turns out I want to write more than I need any one book to be some kind of huge deal. Of course, we'd all love that. But I am still writing, and I'm writing something totally different, because writing is the life, not the book.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to go a little bit over, Terri, because I need to know a little bit more about the memoir in disguise. How did you do that? And I recognize that that's a very
I'll tell you exactly
open-ended question. So yeah,
I'll tell you exactly how I did it.
how does that work? Because I want to do that too, and I know
yeah.
a lot of people
You
want to
do
do
have
that.
to write.
Yeah.
You do have to write the stories first. And a lot of the stories that ended up in the book, I can remember they were written on retreat. I remember almost what retreat the nugget of that scene was written, but also on my own. And I don't like to write linear. It just stresses me out. I don't know how to do it. So I like to just spray stories. I like to have like a packet of seeds and just tear it open and throw it. And then each day tend to a different one. So I would be like, oh, what's a juicy story about my own life I could get into? right? Oh, remember when I went on a date with that guy and I took him home immediately and regretted it? Like juicy, gritty, like half of those did not make it into the book. But I wrote stories that I thought hit a nerve for me. I didn't go, well, this one means this. I wasn't applying meaning. I was writing story, story, story. And
So you
the
didn't go
ones I wrote
framework
about,
first, and then what's a
no, no,
good
no, no, no,
story for
no,
that
no, no,
to illustrate
no,
that point?
no, no,
Okay,
no, no,
okay,
no. Unless
interesting.
you like doing that shit,
Okay,
have at it. No way in hell. I'm not doing it now. I'm
okay,
writing a novel now. I have no idea what the order. I only want to follow the scenes
okay.
first.
So back
And
to
then when you
your
have it,
memoir seeds. You're
back to
tending
the
to, yeah.
memoir,
Mhm.
you write and write and write and write. From the beginning of when I started writing in earnest, thinking I want to write a book, I wrote for maybe 6 years. You don't have to take that long, but I just needed the time. I didn't know what I was saying. And then I go back and rewrite them. And I just had documents and documents of pages. And then at some point I go, okay, this is a lot of stuff. Then I laid it all out and I would look at it and go, oh, isn't that interesting? And this is something Suzanne taught me to do. You look at one piece, you go, that's kind of talking to this piece. Isn't that weird that the story about going with your family to the aquarium reminds me of this date when you went to this place? And there's sort of what's speaking. You're almost holding them all together like magnets to see what speaks to what, but you can't sculpt what you don't have. If I sat down, and my editor did ask for this, she's like, write down an outline of like what the journey is for that. And I was like, oh, I can't. So I was like dragging my feet and I made one up and gave it to her just so she would leave me alone. And I knew I wasn't going to adhere to that. But I said, later I'll just swap it out. She'll be fine. So I kind of would do that if someone asked, but I know better than to strap myself in to some kind of order. Because then I'm like, oh, I'm teaching lessons. Lesson one. That feels so contrived to me. I wanted to cultivate what was wild, what was rich, what was scary, write the craziest stuff. And then there's a pile of papers this big that didn't end up in the book. Because I said, oh, you're a juicy story. You're for the next book. You're good. We'll hold you sit on the bench for now. And at the end, all called together, I had to cut most of it out and then said, okay, these are my favorites. How do they fit? It's almost like you make the picture first and then, or you make all the pieces first and then you put the puzzle together.
Wow.
So the puzzle came after and I go, oh, isn't that interesting? I have out of all these stories I wrote, I have 20 that are kind of connected and then I found the shape and the
That
shape felt right.
that does seem like it chafes against the whole entire book proposal process, which is it's a business plan for your book, it's a writing
No, no,
roadmap,
no.
and then
But I did that first. The proposal
okay.
came after I did all that work. No, but both. No.
Yeah.
Proposal is a straw man.
So how did
It
you
was,
turn what was a book of essays that was a memoir and, kind of literary essays, how did you turn
Mhm.
that into Unfollow Your Passion?
Well, part of it was chafing against what the editor wanted, which was we need exercises at the ends of chapters. I need what the journey is. And I dragged my feet and I said, I need to write it first. So I was racing to write and write and write. It was almost like I was trying to create the flagstones and then put them under my feet to see where they'd go because I didn't know. And as soon as I would impose a form, the work, to me, the structure of a work comes from the work. You don't come up with it and then squish it down like a cake plate. Like I'm going to put the lid on top and this will be the whole thing. If it helps, if some people like that, I don't. I want to find the message in the work. And every story I saw had something to do with this theme or that theme. And I was like, all right, this works. Every time I was told to do a thing. So you give yourself a prompt. You say, okay, how about a time when I felt like I couldn't disobey? And then you like, oh, I'm going to write a story about that. Then you go, oh, this reminds me of another time that happened, another time. Now you have 3 stories. And then you weave them. I think the weaving happens at the end. The proposal is a straw man. And
Okay,
also
well,
the
as an
proposal.
editor whose job it has been for absolutely like years and years and years and years to my job has been to, kind of help people get their books out. I have to say that what you're saying scares the hell out of me because it's really hard.
It doesn't make you feel free?
Well, as the helper, no, it doesn't. It makes me feel both superfluous and also afraid because I can't control the process and I can't really easily know how to engage with it and contribute to it.
But you're not the helper, you're the writer.
No, I'm talking about like as an editor who would be helping someone, with their book proposal or develop their manuscript. It's pretty scary to find the structure in the work. But I love what you're saying. It's just terrifying. That's all. Because
Well,
I think
no, it works. Yeah, I hear
I
you.
agree. I agree with you. I think that the results are richer, but it just takes a lot of you're stepping out on faith that there's something there. And I think that a lot of publishing professionals, myself included, up until I discovered Gateless, and I'm, in a state of transformation right now about my own relationship to the editing craft. But I think that a lot of editors really are working the opposite way to that. It's really sort of
Yes,
like
I understand
let's
that.
build the scaffolding and then hang all the things on it and don't change it. Try not to let it change as much, as much as possible. Keep it stable
Well,
and
the
stick
truth
to
is,
it.
you
So that's
can
what,
work.
but
You can.
it's a little scary, but I'm curious to know how to help someone how to guide and edit them when you're also sending them on this wildly organic process with an unknown destination.
Well, I don't think it's unknown. And I understand the role of the helper, but I'm actually talking to Maggie, the writer, who's trying to do this for herself. And when you think as the editor first, then you're worried about controlling it. And the fact is,
Totally.
the work has its own intention. The work will tell you what it is. It's not out of control. In fact, when a friend of mine was trying to work on a book, and she had her stuff that she was trying to make really organized, and then she had the stuff she wrote in Gateless, and the editor didn't know what was what, and she gave it over. And the editor said, "This stuff feels a little bit lost or contrived. She said, the only piece that feel really strong are these." And every time she picked the ones that were written in Gateless. So it's not meant to disrupt or upend a publishing process. But by the time I get to an editor, I better have a really damn clear sense of what the work is. And when people come to the editor too soon, the editor has too much work to do.
That's
And
right.
no, you
That's
can't
right.
sit there and grow it. So
Yeah.
by the time I got to them, they liked the work. They just said, "We're going to change it up, put a new jacket on it." So a lot of it didn't have to change that much. I changed it because of course it had to plug into a thing. And I did give her what she wanted. There is a rub against the linear and we need to know where it's going. But we realized I don't mean wild as in who knows what this will be. I knew what the themes were in my work because I knew my work. But when someone writes a bunch of stuff quickly and throws it at an editor agent and says, "Figure this out," that's not fair. And the writer hasn't done their work.
Yeah, and I think I have worked with a lot just because of the nature of the business that I've led, and also whatever my own journey. I think I've worked with a lot of people who are in square one, and if you want to get someone from square one or square zero to completion on a timeline, you're going to try to lean into the most predictable process that you can, because
Of course,
you can't
but
afford
that's
to
for a
have it
different
take
goal.
6 years. But you're right. So you're blowing my mind a little bit.
Yeah, but listen, your job is you have a different goal than I do, right? Like when I'm writing the work, I want to feel good about the work and know what it is. As an editor whose job is not to take for fucking ever to finish the book, but to get it done, you're talking about a different goal.
Yeah.
And if that writer knows their work and has agency on their work, you will get the result faster from them, but not before.
So you just mentioned it, they go to an editor too early. What is the right time?
Well, they might not get in front of an editor. I mean, that's a tough thing to answer because did you write it in a weekend? Probably you're not ready.
Yeah.
How long will be given to the work? How well do you know the work? Do you know what you want it to do? I knew what I wanted the book to do and be, and it still does that.
And I think, do you
I thought
know
it was
what
going to be a blonde, and it came out a brunette.
Do you know what you love about what's inside of you? Do you know
what
you love about your work?
Every
Right, that's really
piece
important.
of this. Every piece of this, I know I loved it into being because in the beginning I was like, oh no, what is this book going to be? I had my own fears about it, but the editor needed what she needed. So I did have to force a little bit to make sure it fit the timeline. And I still needed a little bit of an extension. But oh, absolutely. If you don't love your work by the time you give it to someone, that is going to be real hard.
Yeah.
Either they don't love it or they don't want you to touch anything. They are very precious about it. And you show me an author who's precious about her work, the editor's going to suffer during the editing process.
Absolutely.
I am not attached to it. I said, whatever it is, I will make it the best version of that. And I was incredibly flexible because I knew the work was good. That's what happens.
And in a way, being really precious and attached to the work in its current form is not the opposite of not loving it. if you can get my double negative, because I think that when you're overly attached to it, super precious about every word on the page, you kind of don't trust its inherent
You don't trust
qualities.
it.
You don't trust
That's
it.
right.
You don't trust it,
That's
and
right.
you cannot handle looking at its blemishes, or
That's right.
acknowledging that this, this maybe wants to be a little shorter, or that this
No,
belongs in
listen,
a
the
different
work.
book. Yeah. And
No.
so loving its innate qualities, it is not, it's not inconsistent with acknowledging its shortcomings.
Well, also, it's not even necessarily flawed. It's like it's moving through its thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the work is flexible and forgiving. It's more forgiving than the author.
It's like, here's a
afraid we're
delicious
gonna
sauce.
break
This
it.
needs a little salt. That's okay.
Right.
You're not calling the sauce bad by saying,
No,
let's put a little salt in.
You're not trusting that the work can flex, and they're
Right.
identifying their value based on the way words are now. And that's a pretty sure sign they'll never write another thing.
I want to have 17 more conversations with you. I also feel like I want to get trained as a gateless instructor, because this is so fascinating. I think, there's so much.
Opens up the whole world.
Oh
I'm
my
doing
God.
things I never thought I would do.
So we've talked at length now, but so it is time to wrap, and there's so much more I'm curious about. But Terri, how can people find out more about you? Where do they find your programs that you've mentioned?
Yes.
And work with you?
I mean, no one else has my name that I know of, and I have the domain. So if you go to territrespicio.com/studio, you'll learn about the studio. If you're even a little bit curious and go, well, what is this method? I want to try it. It's very inexpensive for like 13 classes a month. It's like $97 right now. You can't beat it. So I would say, if this interests you, try it for a month.
Yeah.
And then you can follow me on Instagram too. That's kind of where I
You're
spend
also
more
at
time.
your Terri Trespicio on Instagram.
No, T Trespicio.
T Trespicio.
Can I change that? I don't know, but it's T Trespicio on Instagram.
Yeah,
so
you can
find
change
me
it.
there.
You can change it. Oh my God, I love this conversation so much. Thank you so much for your generosity. It was just been such a delight to talk to you, and I have more questions than answers now. So that is
good.
A good sign. Yeah.
Questions are the answer.
Thanks, Terri.
I really hope this conversation has inspired you to give so much of your gift to the world that it expands you into your greatest possible version of yourself. Remember, it's not selfish just because we also benefit from it. And here's where I get to make a selfish request. New podcasts need all the help they can get. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and subscribe to us on your favorite platform. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @selfishgiftpodcast. And send me a DM. I'd love to hear how you're sharing your gift with the world.